Podcast. I'm your host, Kashif Khan. We often talk to practitioners who have gone through this journey of my problem was what led me to this practice of I saw people's autoimmune issues, their anti-aging, etc. Not often do we talk to someone who didn't go down the practitioner route because they just finished selling a $300 million company. So their priorities are a little bit different and they have the ability to focus on themselves. And this is a really interesting conversation I think we can have where you, Bruce Bowser, former CEO of AMJ Campbell, first of all, thanks for coming.
My pleasure.
You went through a really cool journey where as you were building this awesome business, which is, in Canada, everyone's heard, everybody knows, you were also working on yourself and exploring healthcare. You were deep into the wellness industry, kind of quietly under the radar. People didn't know there were certain things you're working with and supporting. And this is why, if you don't mind me mentioning your age,
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
62 years old, sexy as hell, right? How did this happen? Because you took your passion of, you took business, health, put it all together and started working on these projects. But it's really cool to be able to talk to someone who's not a practitioner, not a functional medicine doctor, not a nurse, but worked on themselves as a true biohacker, you can call it.
Sure.
And looks and feels the way you do at your age. So thank you for coming.
Yeah, my pleasure. And I think the quick answer to your question is, I was a curious kid, and
right.
That curiosity spilled out into all areas of my life. I mean, I played hockey, as a young man, and loved hockey. And I was always curious about what could I do to get a better edge. I was a goalie, right? So I was always in goalie schools and training, and looking for ways to get that edge. And then when I got into business, started my career in business, it was the same thing. I prolifically would read books on how to be better in business, and it just seemed that there was this whole I'm going back 40 plus years. There was this whole notion of tying wellness, fitness, health, and high performance in all areas of your life together. And so at a young age, I began studying that, and the more that medicine, health and wellness evolved especially over the last 25 years, the more I was able to, to get curious about that, and just found myself in, fields where they were kind of cutting edge. So, there wasn't, 25 years ago, there were not a lot of I don't like using the term age management because I'm, I'm not about not about managing my age. I'm about living the best possible life I can for as long as I can, and doing anything I can to sort of, hack into that. So, over the last 25 years, just, technology improvements in healthcare have opened up the doors to, things that you and I wouldn't have imagined,
right.
And still wouldn't imagine. I mean, I'm reading a book right now. I think you and I talked earlier that I shared with you, where it talks about the speed at which healthcare and innovation in healthcare and high performance is sort of evolving is mind blowing. And, for a lot of people that grew up in traditional healthcare, it's hard to believe because so much is based on research and how long it's been out there. Whereas now things are, well, we've just seen it going through the pandemic and the evolution of vaccines. I mean they've happened at rapid pace. Mm-hmm. So technology's allowed for that.
And your work that you've done, it was a passion, but it led to actual outcomes. I mean, there was a huge clinic that was open. I believe you worked and supported a particular doctor, and he said that this needs to happen. So put money where my mouth is, and I'm going to make it go.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think I got involved with a group of doctors a number of years ago in opening up, one of, I'm going to say Toronto, Canada's first sort of high performance health clinics that were, it was geared at pulling all these pillars together, right? High performance, wellness, your physical health, and then integrating, things like, body work,
mm-hmm.
whether it was chiro, massage, physio, integrating things like naturopathic, healthcare. And so, I mean, pulling all of those together, was a fun thing to do. Doctors, as you know, from working with them, are not always the best business people. So right. I was kind of the business mind to say, hey guys, we don't need a $40,000 instrument right now to do this stuff. Let's run it like a business would run. So, and people say, Bruce, why would you get involved in that as a business? Partially it was just purely selfish. It was like,
you wanted your playground.
If there was a way that I could get access to, cutting edge, high performance type healthcare and biohacks, and I mean, I was all game for it, and still am.
So we work with Dave Asprey, he's an investor in the company, he's an advisor, And people say that he's sort of the founder of the biohacking movement, but you were doing this before the word biohacking even existed.
Yeah, we didn't know the word biohacking. I'm not sure Dave did either. I followed Dave for a long time. I think it was, it's not, I mean, I don't know so much biohacking as it is, feeding your curiosity around what are things you can do to shortcut. I mean, Tim Ferriss, I've been a fan of Tim since he started. And, Tim was, I think, one of the first hackers in general. Look at, ways, how could he learn how to play guitar in 10 days? How could he learn how to do this? And, so if you can find ways, to shortcut things, not for the sake of shortcutting, but for the sake of getting that knowledge, quicker. I'm not a physician, never really had a high desire to be one, but it's an area that I have a keen interest in, the medical field, the healthcare world, as it relates to, living the best life you can live and being, high performance. And, I can remember back in the days, 15, 20 years ago, where, I would sit on boards, governance boards for, sizable companies, and we'd be talking about governance issues around, senior management and, and I can remember thinking, why don't we talk about their health and their wellness? Because, there's so much science-based research out there that shows, if you're fit and you're healthy and you're eating well and you're taking care of your mind, whether it's mindfulness, meditation, that you're going to be a more productive and a better performing executive. And, obviously some of that got poo-pooed at the time, whereas today you're seeing it in athletics, right? All areas of athletics, and especially when it comes to things like sleep. All of the professional sports teams are investing huge money into, making sure that their athletes who are traveling all sorts of time zones are getting, proper sleep management. And so, just curiosity, I think, is what's fed that.
The boards poo-pooed it. You were doing it at a time where it was unheard of, meaning that that's not what business was about. That's not how you support. So you, however, in your own business, said that I don't care what's going on over here. I'm going to change. And before the pandemic even hit, people didn't know what Zoom was. Yeah. And you shifted the entire company virtual, right?
That was I think a little over 4 years ago. So, I mean, it's almost a little embarrassing talking about it some days now because it feels like you're saying, I was ahead of the curve.
Well, you were.
Yeah, but it was ironic. It was just, we were at a point where, I'm the father of 2 daughters and now 2 granddaughters, and so most of my life I had 3 sisters has been about women, and so from an early stage in my career I was about looking at ways that I could make gender parity more prevalent in my workplace. I boards I would sit on, I would make sure that there were women on the boards, and so one of the areas that over the last 5 or 6 years that has been sort of front and center is having a friendly workplace for women, and so most of my head office over the last 10 years was females and myself. And for all sorts of reasons, that worked really well. I just, we don't need to get into that today, but I just find, women can be easier to work with than senior men. And so our lease was coming up for renewal, 4 or 5 years ago at our head office. And I remember thinking now would be a good time to look at taking the business virtual, just finding a way to have people work in a hybrid way, and we weren't using the term hybrid, but, in a way where we would still get together on a regular basis to collaborate. And we found cool places to do that, whether it was at boardrooms that I would rent or at restaurants or events. And we still had a small space where people could get together, but I mean, it had a huge impact on, productivity and, the joy level of working for the company. People could do at home, and so today I get asked, what was the sort of the genesis behind that, and it really was about making the workplace more friendly for especially for the female members of our team, but also I wasn't cutting edge. There companies like Google have been doing this. A lot of the new startups, they were doing it. I don't want to say by fluke, but it wasn't. It wasn't out there, and I think they were finding that you didn't need to have somebody in an office cubicle from 9 to 5 to have them perform at a high level. As a matter of fact, I would argue that people can perform much better when they're not in an environment where somebody's standing over them or monitoring them all the time. And so for me, COVID has, because I took a lot of grief over that. People saying yeah, you sure? You're in the transportation business, And, COVID, I think, has opened eyes for, all sorts of businesses to see, one, out of necessity, can we run our business remotely, which they've been able to do. And now as we're coming, I don't know if we're coming out of COVID, now as we're almost 2 years into COVID, a lot of companies are looking at ways to develop a hybrid model going forward. And I think part of that comes from young people today, right? So whether the millennials or Gen X, looking at their work life and saying, my parents didn't have any work-life balance.
Right.
I don't want that. And quite frankly, I agree with them. I don't think that, my parents had work-life balance. And quite frankly, in my early career, I don't think I had work-life balance. And had it not been for this interest in, sort of health and wellness, I probably wouldn't have developed that. But they get a choice now. And so, I think what you're seeing is a lot of young people resigning. There's this whole resignation movement that's going on where they're saying, there's more to life than, being stuck in a cubicle from 9 to 5. And quite frankly, there's not a lot of science behind it. The 8-hour workday, goes back to the Industrial Revolution. And, it's one of the few things we haven't tweaked in history is, looking at the workday. And I think, like a 5-hour workday, a 4-hour workday, hybrid models is the way of the future. And, sadly, it took a pandemic to get us to open our eyes to it. But I really think, it's going to be a healthier lifestyle. I mean, look, there's nothing healthy about the average GTA employee spending 3 hours a day commuting. It's not healthy. Right? It's not good for you on any level. You can't exercise. You're sitting for 3 hours. Road rage, exists because people just get so frustrated, I think, with, sitting in a car for those length of time. So it was a fun thing for us to go through. Now I get to sound like, I had some foresight. Yeah, exactly.
So one of the challenges with the whole thought behind work-life balance is that, the outcome that you were seeking is not the outcome that people think about. They think about it's work or play. It's not health. They're not understanding that this balance that you create, the load of, hey, by 50, you're expected to have some kind of chronic disease. Where does that all come from? It comes from your nutrition, your environment, your lifestyle, and the latter two are tied to work, right? So we find that when we speak to people about this, whether it's C-suites or the actual individual, that the first thought about this, the term of, it's like, no, I'm willing to work hard. I don't need to play. It's not only about play, right?
Sure.
It's detached also from the play and just be yourself for a while and understand what it takes for your body to recover and heal and be healthy and look like this when you're 62, So, and this is where, when you move forward, the companies that you're now working with and advising, I'm guessing their ears are a lot more open to shifting how they even think about employee health.
Yeah, for sure. I think, in fairness to some of the, the companies of today, the model was created for, some of these folks that are executives of C-suites. They stepped into a model that already existed that probably wasn't open to a lot of changes. Well, now they're open to changes. You're seeing, banks and, good on the banks, by the way, the leadership of the banks saying, we're looking at hybrid models. To me, it's a healthier model. And by the way, the term, I talk about in the book that I wrote, work-life balance. The term work-life balance to me isn't about, work's over here and life is over here. It's about, integrating them into a way that is healthy. And we're seeing that in the sense of, you got a lot of companies today that are providing, I hate to call them perks, but we'll call them perks for now. Perks where, fitness is part of the, the work experience.
Right.
Eating well is part of the work experience. Companies, doing things like bringing, your business into their organization where, employees can look at, how can they optimize their, their DNA analysis to help them perform better. And doing all that, it's about creating some balance. It used to be, I tell the story, when I was in my early days of my career with AMJ, I remember, leaving the office one day around 3 o'clock, and I was vice president at the time. It was like my first or second year there. And one of the other VPs, she said to me as I was walking out the door in front of everybody, she said, "Where are you going?" I'm like, "I'm going to get a haircut." And she said, "You get your haircut on company time?" I said, "Well, my hair grows on company time. I get a cut on company time." But the same applies to things like, fitness.
Right.
We might call it cutting edge, but I put a fitness center in our large building that we had, at AMJ back in the early days, and made it part of our program. It was like, if you wanted to go work out at lunch, 10 o'clock, whatever, just build it into your day. And, we had a full-time trainer. They still do today have a full-time trainer at that building. And to me, that's like work-life balance is when it kind of all comes together. And, I took that a step farther to say that, evenings and weekends shouldn't be all about work. I mean, that's one of the sort of the pitfalls of the pandemic is the lines of, when do you turn it off have got so blurred now that, I think people get burned out because they're kind of on 24/7. And, back before it's popular, 3 or 4 years ago, we put a policy in place that said at our head office, no emails before 6 a.m., after 6 p.m., or on the weekends. And it was like...
that's awesome.
Yeah, no, but it was like, people say to me, dude, you're going to go to business. And I'm like, look, we're moving people. We have a 24/7, customer service line, but, our accounting people, our administration people, our sales people, they don't need to be on 24/7. And even myself, I'd put that, that message would be a bounce back you'd get on my emails. And it would say, look, if you're a customer and you need to reach me, call me on my cell phone, right? Well, I mean, nobody ever calls my cell phone, except for my daughters. It's, so I think, a lot of the principles that prevent work-life balance are, just based on the way we always did things.
Yep. And I think what you're talking about in terms of, so the new reality is I know I work at home, so there's no boundaries between on and off. It just, I do it when I walk by the laptop, I might do a few emails, kids go to sleep, I'm going to go back to the laptop. And what we're finding with that is it's leading to this endemic sleep issue.
Sure. Right?
Because there's no clock anymore. And so all that stimulatory, and this is where we look at things genetically to determine who copes better. The blue light filter stressors, the food stressors, there's no particular schedule to meals anymore, right? Then the stressors of, when you're at an office or you're at work or there's a time and you take that time off and you come, there's another time. Here's kid time. But you're in your office. This is my zone, right? It's now a part of my home. So you don't have that escape. You're not going anywhere, sure. Right? And so we found that that's translating into a lot of sleep issues. So people need to now learn how to work within that new reality. I work from home. I'm remote, whatever it is. There's some sort of guidelines that you have to develop to be able to do that and still be healthy, right?
Sure. And I think that's one of the, the areas that I'm, most curious about when it comes to, your business of, DNA study and epigenetics is taking a look at, I kind of built my, sort of my way of doing things based on, what could I read and, what would work and trying things. But now I think, what you're doing brings a whole new level to tweaking, right? So, am I, sleeping on the right sleep patterns? Am I shutting things down at the right time? Am I eating the right foods for, my DNA makeup that can help my, gut, allow me to sleep better? So there's, bringing the science to it, I think is super cool. But, on a very basic level, it's like, folks, you need to shut it down before you go to bed. Like, I talk to people like, I can't sleep. I said, well, what are you doing before you sleep? Like, I'm cleaning up all my emails. I said, well, that would pretty much do me in, right? If I tried to do that, and what's the first thing you do when you get up? I'm looking at my emails. So,
first thing.
People, they're not meditating.
Yeah.
And, I learned how to meditate, sort of the old-fashioned way 25 years ago, doing guided meditations with an actual teacher. Today, there's apps out there. I personally I use a Calm app that, I can do like a 10-minute meditation. I call it meditation for dummies, where, you don't need to learn anything. You just need to listen to what's being said and follow it. And, 10 minutes of that to start your day, to wind your day down, can have a huge impact on how you sleep and, and your energy levels and what have you. So, I think it's like a lot of things. The pendulum swings too far one way. The pandemic, I think, has caused it to swing too far one way. And it was probably too far that way, but, before the pandemic, where people were just working, kind of, when you felt like sending an email, send an email. I'm a big advocate of saying, look, if you want to work in the evenings because of your, work situation where maybe you're spending some time with your children during the day or you're doing something else, great. Just don't hit the send button, hit the send later button,
right,
and send it for tomorrow morning. So, I get into the habit of sending my emails. If I'm writing in the evening or later in the day, I'll hit send at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. It's 7 a.m. is the best time to get an email in your inbox, by the way, to have somebody read it. So just, hit the send later button. Same thing on weekends. Like, I tell the story, I started my career a long time ago as a banker. And, in the early days of banking, like the late 80s, we didn't have email, we didn't have cell phones, barely had faxes, nobody had them at home. So if you and I were working on something together at the bank and I needed to reach you after hours, I'd have to pick up the phone and call you at your home phone.
At your home, yeah.
And I would think about it. I'd be like, wonder what he's doing right now. Like I'd have to think about, whereas today it's like, comes into your head, hits your, your handheld or your laptop, and out goes an email. And I used to be the worst at it. I'd get onto a plane flying out to, Calgary or somewhere in a different time zone, and I'd pound off 60 emails. And I used to think it's because I'm a pilot, right? And can't believe it's taken this long to tell you that. But I used to think it's because I'm a pilot. I'm on a plane, and it's like I can do these emails, sitting there without any interruption. The reality was, I was in an environment without distraction, right? And I talk about that in the book, that if you can create that environment without distraction, you just become far more productive. And so I'd land, get to a hotel, my laptop would connect to the Wi-Fi, and out would go 60 emails without any regard for the people in Halifax who are getting my emails out having dinner. So I've become much better at that.
Yeah, in that we've had some people argue that, okay, you're saying to do it like this, schedule like this, and say no to this, and I heard this many times where, well, you're a C-suite executive, you control your time, right? You can do what you want. I can't. I'm a slave to the clock, and I don't have time to work out. I don't have time for this. I don't have time for that. The opposite is also true. You're a C-suite executive, so the entire weight of the company is on your shoulders, right? And you can't be awake without thinking about it. So how do you talk to those people when you're talking to the frontline staff that are saying, well, I don't have time to go to the gym?
Sure. Yeah, look, I think that's where good leadership comes into play. So, I applaud those companies that actually see the working benefit, the production benefit, the performance benefit of providing their employees with, healthy programs, whether it's, fitness. A lot of companies now doing yoga and other things during the workday. Companies got put Pelotons in their facilities.
Right.
Doing those things, selfishly as a C-suite or an entrepreneur executive, you're actually increasing your performance for your employees, right? You're increasing your productivity. You're increasing the loyalty. All of those factors that are super important to a company are happening. So, if you're doing it for no other reason than selfish gain, do it, right? Because if not, especially in today's environment, young people, young talent have a choice. Well, even older talent that's, with organizations, they have a choice now about where they can work. There's lots of companies that are offering virtual work or, hybrid style works. And I think you're going to see, the sort of drain of people leaving traditional organizations that haven't got the foresight to adapt and going to places where, they can have a life and work at the same time, which is balance.
I remember talking to a gentleman named John McDonnell who advises TELUS on business strategy, right? And he said, here's what hiring looks like. You're in Toronto, right? Here's your office in Mississauga or wherever. And here's the bubble, right? Because in this bubble, the commute makes sense.
Sure.
Well, what's changed is you have a global bubble now, right? So employers are now competing with literally every other employer for the same role. There's no borders anymore. So all of a sudden, what you have to offer in order to be enticing, and this is where it's not so much a mass quitting. Yeah, within certain silos, that person's still working. They're still doing something. They're just shifting, right? So it's a massive shift towards the people that understand the employees got so much more sort of clout at the negotiating table because their talent is now globally demanded and accessible.
Sure.
Right?
Totally. And look, I think that, on top of that, the pandemic has, really shone a light on the importance of good health, right? I think a lot of people, just seeing people get sick, die, whatever your stance is on vaccination, whether you support it or don't, the fact is a lot of people got sick and died during COVID. And so I think it's, it's created an awareness around, people seeing that, there's benefits in staying healthy and boosting your immune system. And, and a lot of the stuff that you work on, shines a light on that as well. And so I think you're going to see going forward a huge shift at a pace that we would have never thought possible 3 years ago. I think, it's moved, the pendulum has swung so fast in terms of, the positive parts of stuff that come out of pandemic, that there's now a huge thirst for people to, to want to find ways to, employers especially find ways to, to provide perks and healthy options for their employees.
So with that, I know that you've worked on a lot of boards, right? You've advised a lot of companies, and what you're describing is the pace of demand created by what people are experiencing, like the experiential leading them to that, right? Meanwhile, when it comes to health, that's one of the few industries where it's so regulated and there's so much red tape that even though you go in that direction, you may not be able to access the thing. And even though it becomes available to you, it may get squashed, a month or two later. So how do you take this huge wave of attention that's going towards this thing? And there's some consumer products that people want to spend out of pocket, especially in a country like Canada, where like, well, you're supposed to take care of me. I pay my taxes so that I have free healthcare, but your toolkit doesn't include the thing that actually works. And I don't want to go back to that other toolkit. So, from your perspective of working on, how do you get the government to adopt and say that we got to move quicker towards these things?
Yeah, I wish I had a simple answer to that. I mean, I have a lot of good friends that are politicians and work in government, and the reality is that we have a broken system, in my opinion, when it comes to healthcare and a lot of other institutions, that are governed by politicians. It just things are broken, and our healthcare system, some will say it's the best. It's one of the best in the world, and in many ways I think it is, in the sense that we have some of the greatest practitioners in Canada that are in the healthcare field. The challenge is it's broken, and how do we fix it? I mean, I'm an optimist, right? I'm an optimist. I just think good things will happen. One of the good things I think that's coming out of the pandemic is this whole movement towards virtual healthcare, right? That there's so much more you can do, virtually. And I think that could be part of our solution. You're seeing it, during the pandemic, family docs had to work, virtually with their patients. And I mean, I say the difference between a family doc when I was a young man and a family doc today is two things. So when I was a young man, if I went to see the doctor, at 18 years of age or 19 years of age, I would go in, and quite often it would be, he sitting on the other side of a desk with a lab coat on, a stethoscope around his neck, and barely would look at me and say, well, here's what you need to do, and write a prescription, or tell me something I got to do, and I would leave. Today, one of the big differences is that young people go into a doctor's office today. One, it's a good chance it's a she sitting across. The lab coats are often gone. There's no more of this. I'm the powerful one, and the doctor knows that this young person has probably Googled whatever their issue is, and knows almost as much about it as they do. And so there's a conversation that takes place. Yep. That's a huge shift. That's a conversation that takes place. So take that and add it to an environment today where there's virtual. It's not like somebody sitting on the other end of the virtual call, the patient, with no knowledge of what's going on with them. They have access to to Google and to research to find out. So there's actually a better conversation happening today for all sorts of reasons. So I think with virtual healthcare, in a lot of areas, it could take the burden off of our healthcare system. I think that you've seen a lot of companies move towards providing virtual healthcare privately to their employees as a perk. And so, look, the optimistic side of me says, I think we'll get there eventually. And then, to answer your, the first part of your question, I think there, people have choices, right? I mean, I don't know that I'm a huge fan of two-tier healthcare. I think I'm a huge fan of having options in terms of, levels of healthcare. There are those people that unfortunately don't take a huge interest in their health. They just, they could, but they don't. Then there's those of us that do, and to be able to to access things like getting your DNA analyzed, and getting epigenetic reports that tell you what are the things you can do that you can talk about for hours to improve your state of health. Then buying that versus buying piece of clothing or some other article, it becomes more of a priority than it might have been 10 years ago. Yeah, maybe, if that makes sense.
Yeah, maybe you don't have the best fitness routine, but you guaranteed to have the newest iPhone.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I mean, so if now that people see the the heightened importance of your health and the fact that you can actually do things, one of the things that technology and information has helped us to understand is that there, you can have an impact on your health. I mean, you and I have had this conversation before where, I sort of thought my genes were my genes and I was stuck with them. I remember, years ago, like 5-6 years ago, Mansour did, the genetics for my family. And he said to my daughters, well, you got some of your dad's bad genes, right? And my daughters are like, well, that sucks, having your bad genes. But he was quick to say, look, there are things you can do,
right.
Like maybe your genetic makeup predisposes you to cardiac issues. Well, it doesn't mean that you're stuck with that. I mean, I'm talking for you now, but that,
yep.
I learned that there's things I could do to change that outcome. And I think, the public are seeing that more and more. Some of it's flaky, some of it's real, but more and more that there are things that they can acquire that can have an impact on their health and wellness.
I think what you're talking about, so the hub where all this problem comes from, that we're talking when you talk about a broken healthcare system, and then the solution where you start to talk about how you can actually work on the problem you identify. It's a difference between acute care, like I broke my arm or I have a terminal condition and I need to go to the doctor, versus chronic disease. And the problem is that this same toolkit, which we do so well at, right? We do the best we've ever done, any civilization has ever done. This is how we deal with this. Right. And so even when you look at your genetics and you hear, you have bad genes, that sounds like a diagnosis.
Sure.
Right. When it's really the starting point to say you're suboptimal here.
Sure.
And it could be in anything, gut microbiome, a blood marker. If I have a high cholesterol number in my blood, doesn't mean necessarily cholesterol problem. Let's start to figure out why. Right. What are your options? What are your, habits that are the load? And then going back to the telemedicine, it reminds me of the exact same thing, because when you think about, yes, when COVID hit, all of a sudden telemedicine was a covered benefit, right? OHIP, CDC, like most insurers in the US started paying for it, which it was shunned upon previously, right? You can't examine properly if the person's not in front of you, right? So, but again, you're taking the same modality, the same process, and just shifting the context. All you're saying is you can sit there instead of here, right? So, but the good news is the technology sort of comes in, the other technologies shift the way the work is done. It's like, I no longer need to see you when I have a pain point. You need to coach me in between, right? What's happening for the 6 months when I don't see you? The behavioral change of eat this way, exercise this way, etc. That's how you deal with chronic disease. So coming back to your daughter's example of, she would have had to do something, in between that time to make sure she doesn't get that problem.
And
right?
I think that's, that's probably one of the shifts in mindset that, has happened a lot for sure in the last 2 years, because people are far more active in their healthcare, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, the virtual calls with their family docs or with health issues they have, I think were probably more meaningful in some ways than sitting in office waiting for an hour and what have you. So I think when you can get the general public keenly aware of things that they can do to improve their prognosis or their state of health, it's a good thing. And that's one of the things that that most attracts me to your business is that I mean, it used to be 10-15 years ago when genetics testing, DNA testing was first coming out, that people were like, oh, I'm not doing that because I don't want to know. Mm-hmm. I just don't want to know that I may have cancer, I may have heart disease. Why would you want to know that? I kind of got that in the early days. And then as it evolved into something, this whole field of epigenetics, that I can actually do something to impact that and change the potential outcome, well, then it becomes real interesting for me because, because now I get an insight into, a potential flaw well before it becomes, fatal, and I can actually change it. So, I mean, that principle in general, when applied to all areas of healthcare, which I think is starting to happen more, gives you, you're talking about, how do we go from treating disease when it happens to preventing disease, right? Proactive. And I think that's the shift that, I'd like to think. Yeah.
And we're seeing it now because, so the US obviously has a very different, we take for granted what we have and we say that their different model sucks. That's the claim. But what's happened is because the burden shifted to the employers, right? You pay for healthcare, take care of them. They're incentivized in a different way, right? Just like when you're running your business, you shut the office down. Like, I don't need this office, right? They think the same thing. Well, I need this person not only present, but I need them productive. And I also need them to stay, which means I need them happy, right? And happiness is partly their responsibility to give them what, what makes them happy. So all of a sudden things like digital therapeutics, like apps that are therapy,
Sure.
right? Diabetes, do you want to take insulin or do you want to be taught how to reverse the disease? You have companies like Livongo that comes along, gets bought by Teladoc for $18 billion,
Sure.
right? Which I think at the time they had 500,000 patients out of the 30-something million diabetics in the US and the 88 million pre-diabetics, and they got bought for $18 billion because it's known. Warren Buffett, what's his name? Bezos, what's his name?
Yeah, what's his name?
Diamond. They came together and they said, this is actually Warren Buffett that actually said that healthcare costs are the single biggest burden on American business. So they came together to solve it and they failed because they used the same toolkit and tried to work around it. So all of a sudden you're seeing employers paying for this stuff that the insurance company won't pay for, that isn't available at the primary care. And it's shifting and allowing these healthcare innovators to build things. And you're seeing so much of it. So eventually we're going to get this wave start to, get into countries like Canada where there's a single payer that's responsible for everything. There's a system that works. We're not going to touch it, right? But we're seeing the wave. And this is where we've been engaged with some of these companies that, it's one thing to say better science, right? Let's understand the epigenetics, like you're saying, but how do you deploy it? And the behavior change seems to be the key. Meaning, how do I actually get someone to work with me for months at a time, go from where you're at in terms of in the disease state or on the tipping point, and not wait to treat it, but get rid of it. Like you don't need to be sick if it's chronic disease,
Sure.
right? So going back to the epigenetics, this is the tipping point now, where we're now, whether it's us or any other genetic testing company, we're finally at a point where that stuff is actionable, right? Before it wasn't understood well enough. Before it was DNA can only inform genetic conditions, right? If you have a particular gene that turns something on that causes some disease, that's what genetics did, because this other layer of epigenetics isn't resolved with the pill. It's resolved with behavioral change.
Lifestyle
right?
changes.
Yeah, and that's not a prescription, right? That's coaching. That's in between. So this is where you're seeing that all is culminating, because you all of a sudden have the science that's pointing to, here's the epigenetics, here's what you need to do about it, lifestyle, environment, nutrition, and here's the behavioral change tech companies that are coming along that just need this content, right, to make powerful technology, like powerful solutions. And so we're getting there. It's all coming together. And funny enough, the healthcare system that we've been making fun of globally is doing it first.
Sure.
Right?
I mean, out of necessity, but I think, it's a bit of a perfect storm. So, between public awareness, growing at like astronomical rates over the last, 3 to 4 years around, this whole area of health and wellness, and, tech companies coming out with, wearables. I wasn't the biggest fan of wearables originally, just because I was like, we monitor so many things, but wearables and all of these other options that are out there that are quite affordable, even on your iPhone, create a level of awareness around things you can do to impact your health that we didn't think before, and significantly impact your health, right? So that area has made a huge change. I think awareness in general around how unhealthy some of our food supplies are has become much more heightened. When I was a kid, the categories of food we were allowed to eat, we just assumed because the schools told us this is what we should eat, that they were healthy. Well, today, they've had a lot to do with with making people very sick. So I think the perfect storm is people are starting to be far more conscious about what they eat. They're starting to become far more conscious about some of the lifestyle decisions they're making. Hence, you get this exodus of young people saying, I don't want to work 60, 70, 80 hours a week in an unhealthy environment. I'm going to make some choices. Maybe I got to sacrifice a quicker promotion for that. I don't think that's the case, by the way, but all of this coming together, along with the ability to have more involvement in your own personal health journey, it's going to put us in a different place. I don't think 30 or 40 years down the line, I think, over the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see a shift. A lot of things have shifted much quicker than we would traditionally thought things would shift, right? So, I grew up in an era where, shift took place over 20, 30 years. I think shifts today take place, in periods of 2 to 5 years. And I think the pandemic has proven that in a lot of areas that, things can happen quickly if people put their focused attention on that. I mean, if we had the same sort of attention now I'm getting off on a tangent, but same sort of attention applied to other areas of research in healthcare that we've had to creating a vaccine in a quick period of time. Can you imagine the impact that would have?
Exactly. We talked about that with somebody at a conference a few weeks ago, where they were saying, okay, the world came together, this concerted global effort, for the first time ever, did something so efficiently in terms of the scale of what was done, right?
Sure.
And so effectively, why do we still have 18 million people a year dying from cardiovascular disease, which is preventable?
Sure.
Right? Why do we have women who 64% of women, by the way, that get a cardiovascular disease are expected to die on the first case? It's much more prevalent in women in terms of the intensity, and no previous symptoms, no warning sign. They don't even know it's coming, right? 64% of women that get any kind of cardiovascular issue, gone, unfortunately. So why aren't we working on that? So it's that we know we can do it. We just did it, right? It's just there's other problems that need to be solved a different way. So there's some talk around now that we have mRNA technology that perhaps it can be used for other stuff. And I know that, I don't know if it was Pfizer or Moderna was talking about, they're using actually the same technology to now target very specific cancers.
Sure.
Right now that they've sort of tested it, it's working on certain things. So we will see this shift. And Goldman Sachs came out with a report saying that the genetic therapeutics industry is expected to be 4.8 trillion by 2030. So the entire American healthcare industry is 4 trillion. Right? So they're saying this thing that just came about. And so we might see, like you said, we're less than a decade away from potentially seeing an entire different way of looking at disease because of genetic therapeutics. Right?
And look, I don't think, well, I know that none of us, I shouldn't say that. Some people expected to have a pandemic. I think generally speaking, most of the public did not anticipate that we were going to get a pandemic. And certainly not one that's lasted as long as this lasted, and will continue to last for a while. And so, as we come out of that, my hope is that, to your very point, we see more leaders focus on bringing together these the collective brain power in all sorts of areas, and focus it in on world health problems and other world problems, and solve them. And we've proven how quickly we can solve them. In a situation like this. Has it been perfect? No. I mean, it's a pandemic. I mean, how could it be perfect? And I respect other people's opinions, but I think science has done a remarkable job. I think, for the most part, world leadership has done a remarkable job of, putting aside politics for the most part and focusing in on, how can we solve this, this worldwide problem? And, let's be thankful that it wasn't, Ebola, or something incredibly deadly. Because I think sadly it's probably not going to be the last pandemic that we see in our lifetime.
Yeah, I think it's said that there's like 1.5 million animal viruses that haven't crossed over into human populations yet. We now have the thawing of the tundra and things coming up that we don't even know exist. Yeah. They're finding viral and bacterial strains in the ice that are millions, if not billions, of years old that have been totally preserved, popping up. So who knows what the future holds? But what we do know, so to that point, treating every virus as a new, situation or a new solution required versus the innate health and what does any virus do, right? So yes, one spreads faster, one has a longer incubation period, one is more deadly than the other. So they have different attributes, but we understand what the virus does to the body, the inflammatory load. Why are people in the ICU? COVID is not what they're being treated for in the ICU. It's respiratory inflammation and cardiac inflammation. Sure. COVID's the trigger that pushes a very aggressive trigger that pushes them over the edge. So it goes right back to, if you're healthy, right, that resilience, right, that's what you need to whatever's coming. And like you said, it's coming. Something else is coming. We don't know what or when it's coming. Innate health is what's going to, because when the next one comes, it's another 2 years for the next vaccine, right? What are you going to do for those first 2 years if you're not healthy?
And I think sadly, it's not a popular thing to talk about, the fact that people who were not healthy, were more susceptible to, to getting seriously ill and or dying with COVID, and yes, healthy people died as well. But I think COVID has shown us that being resilient and being healthy and, having a strong immune system and, having a healthy lifestyle, fitness, wellness, all of these things gave people, a much better chance of withstanding or fighting it off. So, again, that's not a popular thing to say, but it's a reality. And hopefully, going forward, people will see, the importance of paying attention to their health and not relying on, public health care to necessarily provide them with that roadmap of what it should look like. Because I don't think we're going to see that anytime soon.
Yeah.
But I think, with technology, people, have more access to knowledge than we ever did before.
Yeah. I think you rely on that as a plan B. Like you're back, that you have that to fall back on if you slip up. But the question is, what are you doing to not slip up, right? Sure. What are you doing to take care of yourself? And I would even ask you, like, under the radar biohacker, you don't call yourself that, but you've been doing it. What are some of the things you're doing that people may not be familiar with that you think they should try out?
Yeah, so I obviously get asked that question a lot because it's an area that I have a keen interest in. And for me, I think, some of the priorities were, as a young man, trying never to stop a healthy fitness regime, right? So, we know that, being fit and in shape and maintaining that has a lot to do with, how you fight disease and how you perform, by the way. I think people that are fit perform by and large at a higher level than people that aren't. Healthy lifestyle habits when it comes to, how do you eat? I mean, sleep, I get teased about, my sleep regime, but, when we opened our clinic 20 years ago, one of our pillars was helping people to sleep better. So I became a student of, what are the things you could sleep? Well, creating a healthy pre-sleep routine, whether it's a hot bath, in my case, cold environment, blackout blinds, spraying my pillow with lavender, shutting things down, an hour before you go to bed. Those things don't happen overnight, but when you start to do those, make them a part of your lifestyle, after 2 months of working and focusing on, better sleep patterns, better eating patterns, managing your stress better. I mean, we knew when we opened our clinic initially that, because we were about high performance, that it wasn't just about treating disease. Yes, that was, part of our offering, but a big part of our offering, what were these other pillars? Are you sleeping the way you should? Do you have the vitality that you think you should? Are you managing stress? I mean, that, stress has a huge impact on your overall health. And so, whether it's meditation, whether it's, learning to shut things down, having, some of this balance in terms of, weekends off and what have you, it has a huge impact on, I think, your ability to perform at a high level. So for me, it's always been driven by, wanting to be a high performer. But, and look at, I tell people, look, don't be like me. I'm a bit of a fanatic at it. It's like, you can be balanced. You don't have to be, super into this. You just look for ways, in the area of fitness, in the area of eating, in the area of stress management, where you can impact your health and not just rely on, a doctor and, nothing against doctors, but, that's their role isn't necessarily to, in our system anyway, to help you, live the healthiest lifestyle. Most of them are about treating your health conditions. And so, the more people get involved in that and take ownership of it and, make it a priority in their lives, the better. And, for me, that's what I've done. I mean, I'm perfect. No, just, ask, people that know me well. Of course, I might drink a little more red wine than I should. Yeah. So it's not about being perfect, but it's about developing a healthy lifestyle that, is sustainable, right? So I travel a lot, so I know there's certain things I can't do, that I could if I was, at home all the time. So, I do the best I can. And, that sense of curiosity I have around it, has done a lot to fuel it.
Yeah, I think the curiosity is what leads you sort of beyond the comfort zone, right?
Sure.
You test and toy with things, and all of a sudden, whatever you did yesterday is a lot more comfortable because it's no longer novel. As an example, I recently saw a picture of you sitting in a bucket full of ice.
Oh yeah.
I should say a bathtub. So things like that people would never think are therapeutic or don't even want to try. But I mean, what was that all about?
Well, so I started to see, guys like Wim Hof, teaching, ice therapy
right.
and plunging, and they were doing tests on him. They couldn't make this guy sick. I mean, his immune system was so strong that they could inject him with just about anything. He wasn't getting sick. Well, I tried his extreme ice bathing, and it was like I couldn't do it. It was so painful that the first 4 or 5 times I tried, I couldn't. So so for me, what did work was cold showers, a different type of ice bath where instead of having 70% ice and 30% water, I went 50-50 or 30 ice and 70% water, and would soak in it for 20 minutes, and I could see the benefits, right? So inflammation, it has a huge impact on inflammation. So if you're working out and you're sore afterwards, it works well. My resting heart rate dropped almost 10 beats over the course of 6 months of doing cold showers and ice baths. Blood pressure dropped. So there's a lot of health benefits to that. I mean, be cautious, make sure that you're not. I mean, I was a pretty healthy guy when I started jumping into ice tubs, so I'm not sure that you should start with jumping in an ice tub. But Wim Hof would say, for example, start with like going into a shower, put on hot for 10 seconds,
and
put on cold
off,
for 10 seconds, and and do that for 4 or 5 minutes in a shower to adjust to it. And now I get in the shower, I have to do it for 2 or 3 years, and it's like full on cold. And
okay.
I live in a property that has a well, so this morning we had snow out where I live, and it's the water was cold coming out of there. It can be a bit of a shocker, coming out. I do a sauna most mornings, coming from the sauna into the cold shower, but it's good for boosting your immune system. So
wow.
I don't try everything, but I do try hacks, and if it works for me and I notice a difference, great. I mean, there's lots of things I've tried that say, I'm not doing that again.
So what do you think, if we had to tell people 3 hacks, the easiest to do that you got to do, what would you tell somebody who's starting tomorrow?
I would say, focus on developing some sort of sustainable fitness program, because that's, I think that's one of the key things. So it doesn't have to be, going to the gym 5 times a week. It could be going for a walk, 3 times a week, with your spouse, with your partner, something, just, getting out and doing something active. I would say, focus on your sleep. Most of us don't focus on our sleep. So, some great books out there that you can read. There's some great resources. I mean, you've got some great, information that they could, they could do a study, with you on their sleep patterns, but work on sleep. And it, sleep, by the way, doesn't happen. If a lot of people, the percentage is probably, well over 70% of people that don't have good sleep. It's like, start small, make little changes, right? So if you're going to bed way too late, back it up a half an hour, month 1, back it up a half an hour more, month 2, just make these small changes. And, because unless you take a sleeping pill, you're not going to change your sleeping habits overnight, and the same with fitness. And then, to me, the third thing would be, your what are you eating? I mean, eat more consciously, try to eat, more green foods, try to eat, for me, less meats. I still love meat, but, I can't do a full vegan. I did vegan for like a year and a half, and, it was certainly healthy, but my joy factor went way down. I just wasn't happy, only eating veggies, and I travel a lot, and it was like, it just wasn't fun. So now I try to do, like 70% vegan. So, veggie, and then, 30-40% alternating between, fish and beef. And again, I'm not an expert in those areas, but for me, it's always been about sustainability, right? Like, don't go on a diet that, that isn't sustainable. Maybe you go on it to get to where you want to be, but understand that it's not sustainable. Don't go on a fitness program that's not sustainable. Do things that are sustainable for your lifestyle.
Yeah, and if people follow, so your example, it speaks to it. You adopt something, you try it, it starts to become a habit, and then it becomes imprinted as your daily routine. So you test and try and kind of build that stack of, here's my health routine, and eventually that concern of I don't have time for this goes away, because it's second nature.
And look at it. I mean, you talk about stacking, like, one feeds the other. So, if you've gone from an unhealthy lifestyle to incorporating some fitness and eating a little better, and you start to notice changes, I guarantee you that it's going to fuel that sense of curiosity or that passion around, wanting to do even more. So, you see people, they lost 100 pounds. Well, they didn't lose 100 pounds for the most part in 3 months. They lost 100 pounds over the course of a year. But they've developed a lifestyle that's sustainable, and and then they get more curious about, what else can I do, and it just feeds that, that passion towards having a healthy lifestyle. I'm reading a book now that you and I talked about earlier that, talks about the fact that, we may well see, people in 50 years living to 130, 140 years of age. Sounds unbelievable today, But, if that's the case, and, that's your goal to live longer, which is mine, I want to live longer, but I want to live a, healthy, meaningful, productive life. I don't want to be sick. Right. And so, anything I can do earlier in my progress, which I like to think I've been doing, will bring me closer to that goal.
That's awesome. So you remind me of, on the, final note, where Dr. BJ Fogg, who wrote the book Tiny Habits, and he talks about how you're saying, like, sustainability, stack it, get there in pieces, and then build. He talks about the goal is identity change, meaning that exactly. the habits aren't it's you have to shift your belief in what you actually do and who you are. And the tiny habits will get you there, meaning that I sleep at 11 o'clock. When somebody asks you what time you sleep, for the person who's trying to change their sleep, they'll still tell you the late time.
Sure.
Because they believe that's what they do. And I'm working on it, right? But once they start to say, no, I sleep at 11. Yeah. So work towards that identity change and know that gap in the middle is you getting there, right? And those steps of, like, I'm not there, but I'll get there. If that's the goal, it's so much easier to get there as opposed to focusing on the habit or the problem itself.
Yeah, and look, most of us that have unhealthy habits, they didn't happen overnight. They happen over a long period of time. Yeah. So, to expect them to change instantaneously is, just not reasonable. So, take little steps. We talk about it in the book, not to promote the book, but the book talks a lot, like 1%. Make those 1% changes. Well, 1% over 12 months is 12%, right? Just, 1% over, 24 months is 24%.
For sure.
And you get there, and when you do it in a sustainable way, you're not going to slip backwards. I mean, look, we slip a little bit, from time to time, but it's ingrained, as you said. It becomes ingrained in who you are. Yeah. And changes your makeup. For sure.
Well, Bruce, this was awesome. I mean, I could feel like it feels like we've been talking for 5 minutes, but I think it's been an hour. We can go on forever. Your perspective is something that people don't get to hear often. We talk to clinicians, we talk to patients. We don't have to often get to talk to sort of the high achievement entrepreneur, high, optimized person that can bring back, I've actually done this, right? It works. I can do it. So thank you for coming. I would recommend, in terms of if people want to understand more about how you think and, how to, follow your path, we'll put your book in the show notes so people can access it. So anybody wanted to know and read more about what you're saying, they can just go in there and take a look for the book. Thank you again for attending. This was awesome.
Yeah, my pleasure. Happy to share. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Bruce.